purpose, stacks on our mind. Grinding all day, hustle refined. Chatter is seething, G steers and untamed. Wealth is a title, wealth is a game. Power in heels or sneakers on deck. Respect comes easy when you earn that check. From boardroom to businesses, she's got finesse. This woman right here, built for success. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Built her own throne, what you expect? Dreaming real big, no limit, no stress. She's a bad.
Because if you've checked us out before, you also know I love connecting music and the topic we're going to discuss. And we've been listening to the sounds of K Tranda, and the song is 10%. Did you know that's what the song was about, Robert? It's called...
No, I didn't know. Okay, now I can look it up.
Okay, yeah, feel free. And if you guys know this song, if you've heard the song before, let us know. It's a pretty solid beat, right? And I thought this would be a great song to bring out because many business owners like myself work hard in their business, and maybe you don't work as hard on your business, which if you don't, may pose challenges in being able to get that 10% or the amount they think their business is worth, right? So if you're thinking you might sell your business and you haven't worked on your business, it might be challenging to sell it. So I'm actually right now currently reading Built to Sell. And I don't know if you've read that book either, Robert. I wonder how many businesses out there are familiar with this book. I find it so fascinating because it's an amazing story about a business owner who actually wants to sell his business. It's a fantastic way to learn. Anyway, as I said, it's all about working on your business and stepping out of the doing, which I know, trust me, I find it challenging as well. But it's really important in how you can scale your business to sell. You have to get out of the doing, right? So if you've built your company from the ground up, or you took over a thriving business, good for you. The time's going to come when you're going to need to think about the next chapter. And when that moment arrives, you're going to want to be ready. You're going to want options. You're going to want clarity. And you're going to want to know that your business will be purchased for what you think it's worth. So today, that's exactly what we're going to be diving into. We're going to actually be talking about how you can prepare your business for sale. And it's a challenging process, selling what I call, like, for me, my baby, which is what I do, right, with clients in terms of advising. Selling is actually a challenging thing to do, not just strategically, but emotionally and financially as well. And so to help us navigate this truly important conversation, I'm so excited. I saw you grooving over there, Robert. I'm so happy to welcome you to our podcast today, the Hiring Women podcast. And Robert is actually a partner at Harmony Succession Partners. What Robert does is he works with business owners to create smooth and intentional transitions. I love that, smooth and intentional. And whether that means selling to an outside buyer, maybe passing it on to a family member, or exploring alternative exit strategies, he's really there to help us understand what makes a truly sale-ready business and how can you set yourself up not just to walk away, but walk into the next season of your life with confidence. So Robert, welcome to the show. Thanks for grooving with me. And I'm just truly happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. That is, wow, that was like a 10 out of 10 intro. Like I was just sitting there, I was like, wow, I can't believe this is all off the cuff. That was beautiful. Wow, you're a pro. You're a pro at this. So thanks for having me.
No worries. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It doesn't feel like hard because it's, as I said, it's music, it's setting the mood, it's a fun song. It's actually fun to plan a podcast thinking about what music I'm going to use. It's
smart.
awesome.
Yeah, very unique. I love the idea. And again, thanks for having me. And I'm excited to talk about this topic. It's what I do every day, and what I'm really passionate about. And I always say that we're kind of the best kept secret, because sometimes people think that it's a bad thing to be talking to a broker or someone that is going to help you sell your business, but it's actually like going to a doctor. You want to make sure that you're on the right path and doing the right things years in advance. So hopefully this will inspire many people.
I love that, a doctor. Yeah. So thinking about what's the financial health of your business? Are you even mentally ready? I'm sure there's so many questions I have to ask you. So let's actually start right from the beginning, Robert, which is, what do you think the biggest misconception is that you see when it comes to someone like myself or lawyers, business owners preparing their business for sale?
I would say the biggest thing is that, most business owners think they have to make the decision to sell to then start the process. The reality is that you should be building your business to sell from the day that you start your business, because all the things that we talk about are very logical. You probably already know what I'm going to say because you've heard it from different podcasts and read it in different books, but it's just the application of those basic good habits to build a scalable business, because what's scalable is sellable, and you can get top dollars for it. So it's both a good thing for your day-to-day business as well as for when you want to sell it. But a lot of business owners, they kind of wait until, well, I'm now 65 and I need to retire. Now let's start getting ready. And it's like, it's kind of too late, because by then you probably don't have the energy or the risk appetite to make those changes. And you don't want to rock the boat and try to ruin the apple cart. So you don't make any changes, and therefore you're behind. So,
yeah. But you know what I think of when you say that, Robert? It's kind of like that person who brings in a stager to their home and does all the renovations to their home before they sell it, versus enjoying the home, renovating it so they can live in it. You know what I mean? So that's what I think of when you were saying that, is, are you kind of like waiting until company comes to fix the house up and renovate, and then you're selling the house, where like you should be looking to do all the things that you need to do in your business to get value from your home or your business long before. Like, enjoy the business, enjoy your home, get value for your home, because now you're fixing it up, creating value in fixing it up, but you didn't enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, I find it so fascinating when you were saying that, because I think you could be that business owner who, as you said, just thinks about selling it just before you're actually ready to retire, and then you don't necessarily have the energy to do all the things. So it's really fascinating to me that for a lot of business owners, I'm sure it's challenging to think beyond the day-to-day sometimes in the business. So I wanted to talk to you about as well, what are some of those key pillars of getting ready to sell your business? You're talking about scalability, and I think a lot of business owners intuitively understand that, but may not practically speaking understand that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there's probably 4 key buckets that we focus on from a pre-sale readiness point of view. But even before I get into that, the obvious one is tax. And I always say this: the reality is it's easier to save $1 in tax than to increase the value of your business by that same dollar. So highly important that you get ahead of that. And even now we're working with certain business owners where we're looking at the cash that they have in the company that should have been moved off of that balance sheet years ago, or the family trust that they didn't set up and they want to sell in the next 9 months, and they've left hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table simply because, kind of like doing a will. Oh, well, I'll do it eventually. I'll get to it eventually. And then 20 years goes by and you never did the planning. And now you're in a position where you can't save on that tax. So even before we get into the scalability and building the team and all these different things, honestly, the basic thing is just get your tax plan right and do that a couple years in advance of when you want to sell, because that is the biggest bang for your buck.
So even before adding value with a sale, get your tax situation together ahead of selling your business to really save money, because that's going to add value even before you do anything else, is what
Big time. Because you can try to push up the value of your business, but if you're not keeping that value on a net after tax basis, what's the point of it all? Right? Think about it. It's harder to up that by 10% than if you can save 10% and just doing some planning and paying some advisors to do that for you. So I think there's this mentality of stepping over the dollar to pick up the nickel, and like under investing in advisors. It's classic. Like it's one of the, and we always kind of make the joke that our clients are unfortunately fairly cheap when it comes to planning, because they kick it down the road thinking I don't have to do this until later, when in reality, these are one-time things that can be done years in advance so that you don't have to be in a hurry to do them when you're closer towards your exit. So
and you say that, and I just think you're thinking you're saving on the pennies, but then you're losing on the dollars by postponing all of these things, because you're like, oh, maybe I'll have to come up with a lot of money. Maybe I have to pay an advisor to help me figure all these things out, whether it's a business advisor or a tax advisor. And then you lose on the dollars because you saved, those pennies, which is unfortunate.
That's right. Yeah. So
go ahead.
I was just going to say, going back to your original question, which is like, how do you kind of focus on pre-sale readiness? There's a couple of things. The first and the biggest one is going to be the timing and the reason why you sell. most of the time we realize from our point of view, we want to work with clients that are really actually sellers. That's one of the key questions we ask ourselves internally when we look at a prospective client to say, are they really interested in selling and going through the work to sell? Or are they going to change their mind in the middle of the process and say, I'm going to hold on to the business? Because you sometimes see that. And the idea of selling is really interesting, but the work that it takes is so much. And if you're not selling for the right reasons, either you're going to lose that energy and that momentum when you go through the process, which typically takes about 9 to 12 months, or you're just going to be miserable and the buyer's not going to see that excitement in your face. And, sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. You want to make sure that you're presenting a really interesting story that's exciting to sell towards someone that is either going to buy into that business or buy that business entirely. So making sure that you have a really good reason why you're selling is so key. And we could spend hours on that, because I think for a big part of our business is the psychology behind why business owners sell in the first place. And a big reason why is actually not financial. The reason, usually you can almost always make more money holding on to your business. Think of it this way. Either I sell that bucket of cash flow now for one time, whatever, for 4 or 5 times profit and have no more ongoing income, or I could hold on to that business for another year worth of income or another 2 years worth of income and then sell it for 4 to 5 times. Well, if you actually map it out, you're almost always making more by just holding on. Hence the reason why business owners hold on for so long. Right.
Right.
So you have to kind of mentally get into the mindset of when have you really hit that number or that personal net worth that you can comfortably say, I can retire. That's enough. I'm drawing the line in the sand. It's less about the money now, and it's more about my legacy. It's more about my time, taking control of my retirement and moving on to the next chapter of my life. And so that's what we do. We kind of facilitate that early discovery conversation where we sit down with the business owner and we try to really give them the valuation. And oftentimes the kind of valuation is about 10% of the conversation. 90% of the conversation is, what are you going to do after?
Well,
Why do you want to sell? Right.
that's what I was thinking. I'm like, you sound like we're in the same boat, Robert, in terms of talking to especially business owners, like people who are used to working hard all the time and they have all this energy, that it's challenging for them to stop working, and it becomes less about the money and more about what will they do with their time so that they don't end up selling and regretting, in our case, retiring and regretting it. So I feel like you're playing that. You talked about the 10% the numbers, the other 90 is probably the psychology, which is what I find half the time as well.
Yeah, well, our businesses are so intertwined, right? Like exactly the same a process that a really strong wealth advisor like yourself would be doing with the family and the personal side is what we try to do on the business side, because both are intertwined, right? Your personal life, your personal identity is also your business identity. So oftentimes you live your business as I live my business. Like I can't imagine doing anything but what I'm doing, and if I couldn't do it, I would like struggle to live. I couldn't take a breath. So it's really hard to navigate how to separate the two. That's actually the hardest part of the job.
Absolutely. In fact, I was going to say a number of times when it's a man that's retiring and, I've helped a couple, for example, figure out their numbers and they're ready to retire. The wife will call me and say, don't make him retire. I don't want him at home.
Fair enough. Well, it's funny because you say that, but it's so true. Like I think oftentimes, we want to meet with both the husband and wife, and oftentimes we'll get more clarity from their spouse when it comes to like household needs and or timeline and energy, because there's this kind of fear of giving in to the thought that you're getting older, that you're losing energy, that you're losing motivation. That's seen as weakness, but the reality is that's just getting old. Like that's just moving on to the next phase of life. That's natural. And once people accept that, it's easier to actually move into the next phase. But there's a lot of this stubbornness and resistance to say, well, I can keep doing this. Like, there's always the next project and the next customer and the next innovation around the corner that's just going to keep me in the game longer. And eventually you're just in the seat until you die. And is that why we started these businesses in the first place? I mean,
well, as you say that, I think, do you see any gender differences? So if you're talking to a female business owner who's retiring, are they struggling in the same way?
No. Listen, I love my female clients are my best clients, like by far, like so much better, because I think they're much more attuned with their emotions than the male clients. Generally, sometimes there's some really high EQ people that are just regardless of male or female. But
Right.
in general, I think, ultimately our female clients recognize that they hit a certain point from a risk point of view. They're better at managing risk
Right.
than our male clients, especially with our male clients where half of this is risk management. You have in a liquid asset, your business,
Right.
that requires your constant attention and
Right.
dedication. And if you take your eye off the ball, like that thing drops. Like it doesn't just stay still. It's not a bond. This is something that will slowly erode by if you take a step back. So there's that balancing act of like knowing yourself and knowing, am I really doing the right thing for my business? Or am I actually getting in the way of my business? And I think that being that introspective, that's something that usually women are better at.
Are you here listening to this, ladies? Women are better investors, is what I find as a financial planner on the investing side. They don't like to take as much risk and they tend to have more money in their pocket at the end of the day. And what I'm hearing from you, Robert, is on the business side, they risk manage their business better in a selling scenario. They understand when it might just be time to sell,
For
which is
sure.
super cool. So couple of takeaways you've given me so far is be sure you're ready to retire
Hmm.
and working through the scenarios of what you'll do after you're ready to retire, because it's you're saying it's 10% about the numbers, 90% about what will you do with your time, and really being sure that you're timing it properly.
So I'll give you the cold hard truth. The reality is when we sell business and a year, 2, 3 years later, we sit down with that client, they're really happy about the process of selling, but they actually really struggle with selling post. I would say maybe only a quarter of the time do we sit down with a client and they're like, wow, I'm like so happy. Most of the time there's a
Mm.
loss. There's a feeling of loss. And most people don't talk about it, but the reason why is that if you're trying to do self-discovery after you've lost your identity, that's a really long journey, really long journey. But if you can kind of do that while you still own the business and start to really figure out not 100% of a plan, but at least a rough idea of like what your life is going to look like after the business, that seller's remorse goes away. And it's very common. No one really talks about it in our industry, but it's very common. I see it all the time.
Yeah, no, I talk to clients about that on the retirement side or selling their business side. I'm like, I've got a really good plan, Robert. I'm like the person who's going to write big checks for charities I care about and brunch a lot. So
Fair
that's
enough.
for that's going to be like how I spend my time. I'm very,
Yeah.
very clear about that, and vacation a bit more. That's really it. And I highly encourage ladies who are listening to this. It's sounding like it doesn't matter if you're even planning this to the nth degree and you realize this is something you need to do from a risk management perspective because you're recognizing it's time to move on. They're going to still feel grief about it. And what are you going to do after working and having your identity tied so closely to your business? Think about that. Think really long and hard about that and start planning ahead of what you want your life to look like is what I'm hearing. So what are some of the other points they need to be
Yeah.
thinking
So that's the
of?
bucket of like, yeah, that's the bucket of why. And that's the first bucket. I would say the
Right.
second bucket is really when it comes to the team. And it's so critical. When we talk about businesses that scale, a really good example of a scaled business is, are sales really owner led or team led? If you're the
Mhm.
leader of your sales team and you're bringing in all the business, you're a big part of that business. But if you look at a scaled business that has actually been developed well, you'll see that a lot of the sales originate from maybe your staff or different sources that are not you. So it's so critical to be able to delegate down responsibilities and key functions like pricing the work, sourcing the work, doing the work. The more you can work on your business, the more valuable your business is. And even for me, as we're kind of building our firm right now, I'm definitely in my business. But at the end of every week, what I try to ask myself is, how much percentage of my time in this week have I dedicated to being in my business versus on my business versus on myself, elevating my leadership skills. And if you judge yourself on that report card every single week and you hold yourself accountable to that, you'll realize either how deep you are into your business or how little time you're spending on elevating your own skill set, because you have to keep learning to be better.
Robert, you need to say that twice because I think so many business owners don't spend any time in that whole doing sort of on that wheel, like that
Yeah.
hamster wheel. I don't know if business owners like take that step back that they need. So please feel free to say that twice.
Sure. I'll say it once again. either you're in your business, on your business, or you're working on yourself. You have to allocate time to each of those to really evolve as a leader. Because even if you're on your business, that's really great. I see, lifestyle businesses all the time where business owners are like, I'm not in my business. I'm golfing, I'm taking time off, I'm only working 3 days a week. Great. But if you really want that business to grow, how much of your time is dedicated to actually sharpening your skills and elevating your leadership abilities? Working with coaches or different types of groups like the WPO organization. So you have to always be constantly allocating to those buckets to build a really sustainable business venture around yourself and your business.
Business owners, take note. In your business, on yourself. I love it. Okay. What would be the other bucket?
Okay, so just to finish off on the second bucket. So naturally, what that means is that you have people that you trust. And one of the things that we usually see business owners struggle with is they watch someone do something and they're like, I can do that better, and it's going to cost me less money and be more efficient. I'll just do it myself. And so I was working with one business owner, and I really liked the way they phrased it. You have to accept actually losing time and money by delegating. Like if you think that you're going to be efficient in actually delegating and it's going to be net neutral, good luck. It's impossible to find that person that's as good and as capable as you are. It's not possible, right? So you actually have to kind of take one step back to take two steps forward by, delegating, looking at someone and saying, oh, and kind of just like, scrunching your teeth and looking at them and like, I know I can do better, but I shouldn't touch that anymore because I've delegated it. And over time, they eventually kind of become more efficient and hopefully scale out of that phase. But for maybe 1 or 2 years, you're going to be delegating to people that aren't going to be as good as you. And you've got to be comfortable in taking that hit, whether it's decision making, time, efficiency, whatever the case is. So
ladies, take note. When you delegate, that person is not going to do as well as you do in that role. And you got to be prepared to live with that. I love that. 2 steps back, 1 step forward, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I think 2 steps back, 1 step forward, realizing it's the long game. You're playing the long game in helping your business to scale and grow, which, listen, I'm taking that advice from myself too, Robert. It's one I struggle with as well as a business owner.
Me too. Listen, it's easy to, practicing what you preach is the hardest part of the job. And even in our business, like sometimes we'll be introspective in the middle of a meeting or giving this advice and we're thinking to myself, oh yeah, I should probably be doing this myself. So it's easy to say, it's hard to apply it, but that's why, it's so critical to have someone that holds you accountable. Right. For me, that's my partner, Thomas. We work off of each other to challenge each other and make each other better. But the challenge with most business owners is they own their business alone. They're the sole shareholder. Maybe a family owns the business, and your family's not going to really hold you accountable. So you need to have that person around you that's really either an outside party, a coach, or someone that can really kind of say, are you really doing the right things? Take a step back. And it's all micro habits. Like a lot of these things, people, like you lay it all out and it's such a daunting task to delegate, to find, delegate sales and pricing and hire the team. And all people think about is the cost and the time required to get there. And it's like, well, I'm really scared. And that's a completely fair reaction, but just break it down into like very digestible bites. Like hire one person, take your time, hire the next person and take your time. You don't have to make this all happen in 1 year. That's why if you start earlier, if you can do this from the start of your business, then you're really setting yourself up well versus if you're 2 years away from selling and you need to start delegating, it gets really challenging to do it in 2 years. That's a very short time. So
it's like, don't be so hard on yourself, with your business. 1 foot in front of the other and pace it sounds like is truly important. So some of the lessons I'm hearing here that we've talked about is, be sure you're ready to sell. It's not just about the numbers, work on the business, work in the business, work on yourself. Any other important
So then just getting more into the technical side. So the bucket number 3 and 4, the third is really the financials. So oftentimes when you actually go to sell your business, the reason, I would say the biggest reason why offers fail, or that, you hear about the story that a business owner tried to sell, but it didn't work out, is it's an information gap problem. Meaning the buyer is making certain assumptions about your business to give you that offer. But once you accept that offer, they're going to want to confirm those assumptions. And so they're going
Totally.
to ask for all this information. They're going to ask for the monthly financials and your customer list and all these things. And the more granular you can actually produce that information to support the underlying assumptions of that's a profitable customer, that's a profitable project, here's how long that customer's been with me, here's how many times they order in a month or that we've worked with each other in the last 10 years. The more detail you have to support statements like that's a recurring customer, the easier that process is. And so usually business buyers look at the last 4 years of data and go really in depth. Like closing an offer is one of the hardest things you're ever going to do in your business career. And we don't sugarcoat it at all. Like that, sometimes people are like, oh, well, I have an offer on the table. Like that's not even half of the battle. Like getting to the offer stage is fairly easy because it's no different than flirting. It's like, yeah, I'll give you 5 million bucks. Sure. No, I got to take it to the bank. I got to raise money for it. I got to do the due diligence. I got to bring lawyers and accountants and all these other people to the table, and everyone's going to have their say around all of that information. So the heavy lifting actually comes after the offer is made. And so we highly recommend business owners invest in their systems, invest in a really strong accountant and or bookkeeper or financial controller in their business that can really help them through that process of selling, because oftentimes sellers don't want to bring anyone in and they try to do it all alone. But the reality is you got to run your business and then also sell your business.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
2 full-time jobs. That's too much work. You're going to burn out and you're not going to be your best self. But if you can kind of build the systems and then have a key trusted accounting financial resource to help you through that process, it becomes so much easier. So that would be bucket number 3. And then bucket number 4 is the customers. So not only do we look at what a business is generally valued on a multiple of profit of your earnings,
Right.
but the reality is that quality of the revenues underlying that profit are one of the key considerations that a buyer is going to look at. So the easy way to think about it is that, are you in the printer business or are you in the ink business for the printers? So if you really want to work hard and sell that one customer on that $500 printer, that's great. But they're not going to come back to you for probably a couple of years.
Right.
Whereas if you sell them the ink, they're going to come back to you every month, every quarter. So there's a more recurring element to that relationship. And so buyers prioritize ink related type companies versus printer companies
Right.
because the cost and the effort to win a customer is so high in any business. But if that customer is coming back to you more often, that customer is more valuable than a customer that you fought for once and they go away. So the quality of your revenues is so key. And so what work are you really chasing? Regardless of whether you're a manufacturing company, professional services organization, anything. You could look at the recurring nature. That's why, Jackie, you're in the best business in the world. Think about it. You have a captured client base that, so long as you do a really good job, every year they come back to you and invest in more and more with you. So your business is really high in recurring revenue. Hence the reason why wealth businesses trade for such valuable multiples.
Right.
But if I were to go to a general contractor who does new build projects, well, they're borderline unsellable. Some of them can't even sell and they have to shut down
I
because
didn't know that.
yeah. So GCs are really tough to sell because there's just not a lot of recurring nature to their book. So people are buying people, but not much else because there's no real underlying assets either. So the quality of your revenues and the nature of how recurring it is really key. So is the concentration. So say, for example, for you, you have maybe 100 families or whatever, you're
Right.
spread out across 100 families.
That makes sense.
But say, for example, you got 4 customers that make up 80% of your business.
Yeah.
How much risk is that for the buyer?
A
And
lot.
therefore, a lot, right? So really that is another big area that we talk about on a pre-sale readiness is focus on chasing the right revenue dollars, focus on diversifying very important relationships, and if you can, try to get contracts because the best customer is not only someone that's recurring, but is contracted. That has to come back to you. That is the best customer. So
the quality of revenue is important. And it sounds like when you were talking about point 3 is recognize that once you get the offer, the work really begins.
yes,
And you might be running 2 businesses, the business you're selling and the business you're still in, which is exhausting. So you need a really good team of professionals around you. I have another question around how this might look different, selling the business, because you talked a little bit about service businesses versus product businesses. Is there any different advice you'd give to someone who's a business owner selling a product versus
Mhm.
selling advice you'd give to a business owner selling a service like myself?
Yeah, yeah. So we do a lot in the professional services world. So right now we're working with two different engineering companies, and the reality is when a product-based business like a manufacturing company or a distributor, you got the stock on the shelves, you have the equipment in the facility. There's real hard assets. In a professional services organization, maybe there's an equipment and a coffee machine. So there's no real value in terms of the underlying assets. So
Right,
really, your assets are your people. So the key difference is the transition of people. In a manufacturing company, there's more emphasis on the actual hard assets, whereas in a professional services organization, it's all about the people. And so,
right,
so one of the key things from a seller point of view is that you will usually be expected to stay around longer in a professional services organization sale because you are probably more important to that business, and there are a lot of things that you maybe can't delegate. Like Jackie, you can't delegate everything that you're doing in your business,
that's
right?
what I was thinking exactly.
Yeah, you just can't. So in that situation, that's not your fault to say that you didn't properly prepare because there's a certain extent of business that you just can't delegate because you are the business. It's your
Right,
wealth business. So
right.
what you have to do is actually stay on longer to transition into the next buyer. Hence the reason why most times when people buy a wealth book, that's a multi-year, 3, 5, sometimes even 10-year transition. So
Well,
give
you say
yourself.
that maybe I should be looking now. I'm freedom 55 this year. I want to, in the next 10 years retire. You hear that? So you do not want to be the person in a service business hiring community that starts at 65 looking to sell so you can stay until 75.
Yeah, big time, big
Respect you.
time. So right now, one of our clients is 75 in an engineering firm. Really nice guy. The challenge is like that process. We've been very transparent to say it's going to be a 3-year
Oh
transition.
my God.
So you're going to be out of this at the earliest, probably at 78. Now, in that situation, he does want to work. He does, he's healthy and all that, knock on wood. So it's great. But if you don't want to be stuck, just realize that there's like, especially with professional service firms, like if you want to get out at 65, you should probably start the process at maybe 61 because it takes about a year to sell and then 3 years to transition. Sometimes maybe you can get it shorter, but to maximize value, to really get the top dollar for your business, the longer you stick around, the better in the buyer's eyes they can manage the risk and pay you more money.
Wow. That is an eye opener for me and probably a lot of the community that's listening. So if so community, stay with me. If you're not in overwhelm listening to some of this, please hang in there because I'm going to ask you, Robert, if someone is not sure after listening to all of your advice,
Yeah.
where to start, what would you suggest? Where do they start if they're like, oh my gosh, I've had so much to think about in this
Yeah.
conversation? Where do they begin if they're looking at selling?
So I'll give you a roundabout answer because the easy answer is just call us and we can have a conversation, right? So that's the easy answer, and that's obviously the biased
And
answer.
we
But
will be providing Robert's information. So don't you
yes,
guys worry. Don't you ladies worry. We will have all of his details in our show notes. So look out for that. But other than calling you, what should they be
y-
thinking about doing to get
yeah.
started? Even
Well,
getting
well,
in the mindset.
so there's a couple key different people in your business network. There's your accountant, there's your banker, there's your lawyer, then there's a potential M&A advisor like us, and then there's your business friends and colleagues and people that own companies themselves. What we typically see is that when you actually start the process, you either go to your accountant, who unfortunately sometimes is too busy because they're day to day in their business and they're not really in the advisory business, they're in the accounting business.
That's right.
You could go to your banker, who is in the financing business, and then we'll try to cross sell you all the different products and get you in
Right.
front of different people. Or you can go to your lawyer, who is more transactional and bring them in when they're ready to sell, but they're not really in the advisory business as much. Really talking to other people that have been through the process is probably the best first step, just to get a raw, unfiltered take on what it takes to sell. And we hear it all the time where, our clients reach out to their colleagues and friends and they say, like, well, this person told me this person told me that. So do some like research and get a couple of different takes. Everyone's going to have a different war story and take on how they sold business, and then start the conversation with an M&A advisor. We're not in the hourly rate business. Our business is not to charge you every time you pick up the phone, we're going to charge you $300. It's
Right.
not, because we're looking to build a long-term relationship. And so I go back to my earlier comment, which is there's this hesitancy to even pick up the phone. But the reality is we can just be a sounding board for you to pick up the phone. And I had this call a couple days ago where someone, it was so funny, another engineer actually, and it was interior designer. And he's got this list of questions and he's just reading off of this list. And he asked me, he's like, okay, cool. I'll call you in 6 months or 12 months and click. And that's it. So, just even like crowdsourcing questions and ideas, and then testing that with an M&A advisor to say what's real and what isn't, what are the real answers and real steps, is a great first step. And then when you're really ready to actually commit to the process, evaluation is so key. And the business valuation is really the line in the sand today to say, how much am I really worth? Is that number enough? Or should I hold on to my business to grow it to get to the number that I actually need? And there's a couple different ways you can go about that. There's the certified business valuator, the CBV, that maybe your accounting firm can offer. That's a paid service to get that valuation. The reality is these M&A firms like ours, we actually provide preliminary complimentary valuations.
Okay.
So even just sitting down with us, spending 1-2 hours going through evaluation, and then it's not going to be a big fancy report. It's just going to be a back of the napkin analysis to say, based on these numbers, you're probably going to sell in the X to Y range. And that's a good starting point to then start to plan, is that my number? Or do I need to go and keep building this business for a couple more years?
And do you give advice on what they need to do as well?
Oh, yeah.
To get their business to that level where they can get that number that we were talking about, that they can use to go to the next chapter of their life, like brunching.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So absolutely. So our goal is to really give you that number, and then challenge you in terms of how you can grow your business. So we're not in the business of trying to rush someone to sell, because if you go back to my very first comment, the reality is if you're not a seller, you're not a seller. You can't force someone to sell if they don't really want to sell, because someone along the way is going to say, you really want to sell this now? And you're going to change your mind. So genuinely, we're not in the business of like trying to push people to sell. We're trying to flush and challenge you in terms of your thinking. But the reality is that in those early conversations, we're going to identify a couple things that can be improved, whether it's the financial systems, it's the quality of the revenues, it's your involvement in the business. And there'll be recommendations around, do you need a business coach? Do you need a recruiter? Do you need a part-time CFO? Who do you really need to lean on to elevate the value of that business? The thing that requires, though, is cost. So, I go back down to the comment. This is not an easy process. It's a multi-year journey. You have to make the investment, because, we can give you the valuation. I see it all the time where they're like, oh, that's really good. And they do nothing. And they do nothing about it. And then 5 years later comes by and, the value is the same, or it's actually eroded. So you also have to follow up that valuation with a plan. What is my plan? Do I want to sell now for this number, or do I actually want to double down and build the business and make the investment and focus on scaling the business?
Yeah, that's why I call the business I'm in my baby, because if you leave it, it suffers from neglect, right?
Yes.
Honestly, Robert, this has been gold. And I just wanted to know if you had any resources. That you were talking about doing some research to kind of figure out what your business is worth even before talking to you. But do you have any resources that you can offer people who are starting the journey? If you do, please let me know, and we'll add it to our show notes. I'm definitely going to also have people connect with you. If you're listening now and you want to connect with Robert on LinkedIn, or find you on your website, I'm going to have all of those things available as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll say a bit of a self plug. So there is one I would highly recommend. So I have a YouTube channel. It's called So it's called ironically Finance Kid, because I look so young. So yeah. So I opened it up a couple years ago, and I guess the name has stuck around, and it's actually become quite popular. It's got about 44,000 subscribers, and
amazing.
So a couple of videos have gone viral. And so if you actually go and Google just private business valuation, my video is the first search result in videos on Google. So I highly recommend you watch that video, because that video I actually walk in detail, and there's two parts. The first is more qualitative, and the second is more quantitative around the numbers. And it's about an hour and a half combined. But if you seriously just want to, at your own pace, learn how business valuation works and what buyers really care about, strongly recommend watching that video. It's got about 40,000 views now. And probably once a week, I get a business owner that reaches out just asking questions about that video. So I think that's a really good starting point if you don't want to talk to the broker first.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to drop all of that. Don't worry, we're going to drop all of that in the show notes. And to our listeners, if today's conversation sparks something in you, and I hope it's not fear or overwhelm, please share it with a fellow business owner. Preparing your business for sale is actually one of the smartest, most empowering moves you can make. And it's not because, as you heard from Robert, you have to sell, but because you can. Similar to what I talk to people about in retirement, not because you have to, just because you want to. You have that opportunity, right? So if you love this episode, please leave us a review, share it with your power circle, and subscribe, because we don't want you to miss what's next. All right. And of course, if you need support on this journey, please feel free to DM us. Remember, money is power, and you deserve to own yours. So please keep building, keep earning, and keep living the life you want. Until next time, High Earning Community, I'm Jackie Porter, and this is the High Earning Woman Podcast. See you next time. Bye, everybody. Thanks again, Robert.
Thank you so much.